Hello, gang. Tattooed Biker here with you. Boy, is it good to be back. It's been a rough week or two, and I know I'm behind on answering comments, but rest assured, I will read and answer each one. I'm just moving a bit slow these days, and wanted to sort of focus on creating a video whenever I could sit down to work, but truth be told, I've really missed you guys, and I always look forward to hearing from you. Well, enough blathering from a sentimental old fool. Tonight I've got 4 true stories from real people, detailing unexplained and terrifying experiences in international and state parks. So grab your boots and let's ride. Number 1. Dear Biker, I discovered your channel while trying to research cryptids. I was shocked by the experiences in your stories, and especially how there have been other cryptid and paranormal phenomena reported in parks. I don't know how compelling my experience will be to you, as I didn't get a visual, but I figured I could share them, and if you or your community could possibly shed some light, I'd really appreciate it. I'm not sure if these experiences are of the same phenomena. One specifically I know is unrelated, but still very strange. You see, when I lived in Ellicott City, we didn't use the AC in the summer, so we slept with the windows open. One summer in particular, I routinely heard large animals in my backyard that backs up to a tree line, which is less than a mile from Patapsco. Whatever it was really big. It was a big, lumbering animal that walked around slowly. Definitely not a deer, and the footsteps were way too heavy. But the strangest part was the vocalizations. It was a deep squawking, kind of like a squawking bird, but deeper and much larger sounding than any bird. The vocalization always accompanied the footsteps. Now, I've heard audio files of Sasquatch before, like the ones from the Sierra Mountains and the ones in Ontario. This sounded nothing like it. One of my friends said he had heard it when he was smoking a cigarette outside. I asked my mom if she had heard it, and she got upset. Now, my mom is religious and doesn't entertain the idea of the unexplained, but this was at night, and I was a teenager at the time. And I remember always being awake when it occurred, like watching TV in my bedroom. I don't remember being awoken from sleep to this sound, so I definitely never dreamed this. On one occasion, a group of 6 or 7 of us was chased out of the park at night. There was a little clearing we found 50 years or so off the trail. In high school, my friends used to go there at night and drink and smoke weed. We were in the park at night every weekend. The sounds of deer and fox were pretty much normal to us. We heard heavy footsteps and twigs breaking off in the distance. We said it was just a deer and we kept talking. But the footsteps got louder and louder. Just deer, we kept saying to each other. Then, whatever it was, charged us. Again, this is a decent-sized group of guys. Whatever it was coming straight at us. My friend Ben was our leader back then. He was a little older and generally more mature and tougher than the rest of us. He quickly jumped to his feet, staring in the direction of the charging, white as a ghost. And that's when we realized that all this just wasn't normal. We all ran out of the park at once and didn't go back, not for a while anyway. One time, a few years later, I was stalked in the park at night. We were all about 21 now, and drinking at the bars in old Ellicott City. We stayed until the last call. Leaving the bar, we weren't ready to go home yet, so we decided to go on a night hike. We were walking along the trail just talking, telling jokes. And that's when we'd hear the sound of those heavy footsteps right behind us. We'd keep walking 10 or 20 yards, then hear the sound at 11 o'clock. We'd walk some more and then hear it again at 3 o'clock. This went on for a mile or so before we said, "Screw this," and just left. I've spent my life hiking that park, and I've never been followed like this before. I was back at the line and at one point moves toward the middle. The guy who was behind me, my friend Eric, was an outdoorsman too and had just got back from a tour in Iraq. Tough guy. He said F you to me because he was now in the rear and he was scared too. He grew up there and had never experienced being stalked like this either. And the last story is different than the rest, but equally weird. In high school, we decided to illegally camp in the park because we had no money to reserve a camping spot. So there were 4 of us. The plan was that my friend Chris would be dropped off at a park entrance to hike in with our gear. The other 2 found an inconspicuous place to park so their cars wouldn't be outside the park all night and draw any undue attention. So me and my friend Chris are walking down the path just normally. This was on an asphalt path. The entrance was a swinging bridge entrance in Ellicott City. Parallel to the path is a tall ridge, and on top of that ridge are the train tracks. So we're walking, and we see the glow of a fire on top of the ridge near the tracks. It's a little odd, but we figured it was just teenagers like us and kept going. We heard voices as we got closer, but again, just thought it was kids like us. Then we got close enough to hear the voices. It was multiple voices, what sounded like men, yet they were talking incoherently, like just yelling gibberish. It was like no language I'd ever heard. It wasn't Spanish, Japanese, German, or anything like that. It sounded like a group of insane people, just yelling garbled nonsense. We stood there in silence listening. I kept telling myself that I couldn't be hearing this, that this is impossible. This can't be real. Then my friend Chris said, "We need to get the hell out of here." And so we tore off back to the entrance. We called our friends to pick us up, and we never went camping that night. I've got one more story for you, and I hope these aren't boring to you. My friend lives on a farm that borders the Patapsco. So much wood on their land they could hunt on it. He was hunting some small game out there. I can't remember what exactly. Let me say this is best, most experienced, and most knowledgeable outdoorsman that I know. He spends almost all his free time hunting or doing nature photography. This guy really knows these woods. And he told me he saw a rotting groundhog crawl out of a hole. He thought it might have rabies or something, so he shot it in the face. He said it just kept crawling at him, like nothing happened. Said he put 3 more rounds in it before it stopped, turned around, and crawled back into its hole. I know a zombie groundhog sounds insane. He knows it sounds insane. But I can only say that I know and trust this guy, and he's not the lie for attention type. He saw this and it really freaked him out. He said he had no idea how that was even possible. He said he actually saw the rounds connect, the small indentations in the fur where they went in. So sorry if all that was a lot, but hopefully you found it interesting. If you have any ideas about what I heard or what chased us, please share them with me if you have the time, or if you have any idea about that groundhog. If you have any resources about paranormal stuff in the area, if you could point me to them, please share, and I'd greatly appreciate it. Thank you for your time. Signed, Aubrey. Number 2. Dear Biker, my story goes back to 1975. My girlfriend and I were driving back to Idaho, where I was going to school. We were headed toward Yellowstone National Park and Montana East Gate in a little yellow Volkswagen. It was around midnight, and it was kind of snowing. Just picture a 2-lane road with tall trees and no moon or anything. Just our headlights and the snow falling. All of a sudden, there was this figure I saw walking right in the center of the road, walking in the same direction as me. In other words, her back was to us. It was a woman. At first, I noticed her, and I told my girlfriend, "Do you see what I see? A girl walking out here at midnight. It's probably 30 degrees out." The closer we got, the more detail I could make out. I was going to roll down my window and ask if she needed help, but we noticed that she was wearing very old, I'm guessing 19th century garb and clothing. She was wearing hobnail boots and had a long shawl around her shoulders and her hair. She had long brown hair, down probably a little below her shoulder blades. And the closer we got, we noticed something weird. Her hair was completely dry. Not wet like you would expect for someone out in the snow. I was about to roll down my window and my girlfriend said, "Don't even stop. Don't even look. Go." And that just really freaked me out because I was just ready to slow down. She said, "Don't even look in the mirror. She's got no face." I immediately drove away. As you can imagine, here we are, putting along in a little Volkswagen, and I just slowly moved over to the right to avoid hitting her. As I moved off and later got to the gate, the ranger said, "Sorry, the pass is closed tonight due to the snow." And I asked, "You mean I gotta go back?" And he said, "Well, there's a little motel about a half-mile back." We were terrified out of our wits. Anyway, we made it to the motel, and fortunately, this guy still had a room available. As soon as we got in the room, we just locked the door and put the chair in front of it. We didn't sleep the rest of the night. Thanks for reading. Signed, Martin. Number 3. Dear Tattooed Biker, we live in Richmond, Virginia, and there are so many historical locations in our area, and I was determined that my young daughter experience them all. One afternoon, when she was about 4.5, we took the 45-minute drive to Jamestown State Park. At that time, the state park was a wide open field with just a few historical markers, a historical church, and a statue of Pocahontas. I thought it would be ideal because it would allow my daughter to run around to her heart's content. I figured that when she tuckered herself out, we'd have a nice lunch in Williamsburg and go home. Easy peasy, right? When we arrived at the Jamestown State Park, we wandered around the courtyard of the church. My daughter became absorbed with the statue of Pocahontas for a few moments, and then we walked on. It was just her, the ranger, and I in the park, and they had no other visitors that day. I was kind of happy to have the place to ourselves. I started walking toward the walkway, thinking my daughter was right behind me. I turned around and noticed that she had stopped walking. I thought that it was because maybe she wanted to go back to the statue, so I said, "Look, let's go see the park." She still refused to budge. I took her by her little hand and started walking with her up the pathway towards the foundation markings of the original settlement. She suddenly stopped and refused to go any further. She turned her little face towards the James River. I told her we could take a quick walk around and then we could go have some lunch. She looked up at me with her big brown eyes and said, "Can't you hear the babies crying in the water?" She had such a look of concern on her tiny face that I did what every mommy would do. I picked her up by the back of her overalls and carried her out of the park like a little purse, put her in the car, and peeled out of there. About a decade later, archaeologists discovered that a majority of the original settlement had been reclaimed by the James River. I often wonder if it was the spirits of the settlers that she was hearing, but her mind couldn't work out where the noise was coming from, because that area is now covered by the water of the James. Signed, Anonymous. Number 4. Hi, Biker. In June of last year, I went camping for a night with 4 friends in Bald Eagle State Park in Center County, Pennsylvania. We had reserved a site that was somewhat remote, not near any of the other campsites. After we got there early, we hiked up to the site, set up camp, and then hiked around the area. Later, we made a fire, cooked dinner, and turned in not long afterwards. At around 2 a.m., one of my friends and I couldn't sleep, so we trekked up to the main road. When we got to the road, we stood near the entrance to our site. And as we were standing there, a black pickup truck with its lights off appeared out of the woods and passed us very slowly. It was unmarked, but not a ranger. After 45 minutes or so, we decided to head back to bed. One of the girls went off into the woods to take care of some things, while I climbed back into the tent I shared with her and got into my bag. After a few minutes, I heard her moving through the leaves towards the tent, coming from my right. But at the same time, I also heard the unmistakable rumble of tires on the ground. I stood up and looked out of the little screen window on the tent. It was a perfectly clear night with a very bright moon, so I could see everything pretty clearly. I saw my friend come sprinting back to the tent and duck behind it, just as the black truck pulled into our campsite, still with all its lights off, and then shut off its engine and just sat there. The truck was parked about 50 feet from my tent, but I couldn't see a driver or how many people were in there, so I just watched it. My friend had ducked down behind our tent, and I could hear her by her breathing that she was terrified, but neither of us said a word. We just kept waiting for something to happen. Eventually, after 10 to 15 minutes, the truck started up again, and then backed up down the narrow dirt road. It never turned its headlights on. I heard it drive back in the direction it had originally come from. My friend burst into the tent a second later. She was completely freaked out and wondered who was in the truck. After a frantic conversation, we went and laid down, but we never could relax enough to go back to sleep. In the morning, we all packed up and headed out as we had planned. We checked with the park, and they don't own any black, unmarked trucks, nor did any ranger come to check our site during the night. The reason I'm writing to you about this is that I know that you've received several Bigfoot reports from the area. I was just wondering if you had heard or read of any other strange human activity around the location. My other two friends, strangely, never noticed or heard the truck. The entire incident just never seemed right, and it's bothered me ever since. Thanks for reading. Signed, Hank. And there it is. All I have for tonight. Thanks for spending a little time with me this evening. I'd love to hear your thoughts about these experiences down in the comments, but please, keep an open mind and keep them respectful, as the submitters may also read them. As always, until next time, stay curious, stay vigilant, stay safe, and I'll be seeing you on down the road a ways. Biker.